everyone, and welcome back to our channel. Tonight I have a spine-chilling tale to share with you. A story so eerie and terrifying, it will leave you questioning reality. So gather around, dim the lights, and prepare yourself for a journey into the unknown. This is a story that I experienced personally, and it still haunts me to this day. My journey began in a quaint little village, far removed from the hustle and bustle of city life. I arrived at a place called Greenridge, an old village surrounded by hills and dense forests. The village seemed almost untouched by time, with ancient trees casting long shadows over cobblestone streets. I was there to find inspiration for my latest work. I had heard that the serene landscapes of Greenridge were perfect for an artist seeking solitude and creativity. Little did I know, this place harbored secrets that were far from serene. The first evening in Greenridge, I took a walk to explore the surroundings. As I strolled through the village, I noticed an ancient willow tree in the distance. It stood on a hill, surrounded by blooming pear trees, their white blossoms glowing under the fading light. I felt an inexplicable urge to capture this scene on canvas. Setting up my easel, I began to paint. The tranquility of the moment was soon shattered by a blood-curdling scream. It was a sound of pure agony, echoing through the still evening air. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest, but saw nothing unusual around me. Dismissing it as my imagination, I packed up and returned to my lodging. Later that night, as I was having dinner, the wind outside began to howl. A storm was brewing. Suddenly, a sorrowful wail pierced through the noise of the storm. It was a woman's cry, filled with despair. I rushed to the window, but saw only the darkness of the night. My thoughts were interrupted by a frantic knock on the door. Who could it be at this hour, I wondered aloud. I opened the door to find an old man, drenched from the rain. His eyes were wide with fear. "Please, you must come with me," he pleaded. "Something terrible has happened." I grabbed my coat and followed him into the night. We hurried through the rain-slicked streets to the village square, where a small crowd had gathered. There, hanging from the ancient willow tree, was the body of a woman. Her face was obscured by her long, dark hair, and her dress was soaked with rain and blood. The villagers were whispering amongst themselves, their faces pale with fear. I learned that the woman was named Emma, a local who had gone missing several days earlier. The sight was horrifying, but what struck me the most was the expression on her face. It was twisted in its look of pure terror. The next day, I couldn't shake the image of Emma from my mind. I decided to visit the tree again, hoping to understand what had happened. As I approached, I noticed something glinting in the sunlight near the base of the tree. It was a small silver locket. I picked it up and opened it, revealing a photograph of Emma and a young man, both smiling happily. I asked the villagers about the locket, and they told me the young man was Emma's fiancé, who had mysteriously disappeared the same night Emma went missing. Some believed he had fled in fear. Others whispered of a more sinister fate. Days passed, and the atmosphere in Greenridge grew heavier with each passing moment. The villagers spoke of an old curse, a tale of revenge and restless spirits. They said the willow tree was a place of execution centuries ago, where accused witches were hanged. One evening, as I was painting, I saw a figure standing near the tree. It was Emma, or rather, her ghostly apparition. She was pointing toward the forest. Compelled by a force I couldn't resist, I followed her into the dark woods. The path twisted and turned until we reached a clearing. There, half buried in the earth, was an old, weathered chest. With trembling hands, I opened the chest to find a collection of old documents and artifacts. Among them was a journal that belonged to Emma's fiancé. His entries spoke of their love, their plans for the future, and the dark presence that began to haunt them after they found the locket. As I read the final entry, a chill ran down my spine. He wrote about a malevolent spirit tied to the willow tree, a spirit that claimed the souls of those who disturbed its resting place. Emma and her fiancé had unknowingly awakened it when they discovered the locket, and it had pursued them relentlessly. Realizing the danger, I quickly reburied the chest and fled back to the village. I knew I had to leave Greenridge, but before I could, I was visited by the old man who had first knocked on my door. He revealed that he was the last descendant of the village's ancient guardians, tasked with protecting the village from the curse. He handed me a small vial of holy water and a charm, instructing me to sprinkle the water around the willow tree and place the charm at its base. That night, under the cover of darkness, I did as he instructed. The wind howled and the trees seemed to groan in protest, but I completed the ritual. The next morning, the village felt lighter, as if a great burden had been lifted. The villagers went about their day with a sense of relief. The old man thanked me, and I knew it was time for me to leave. As I boarded the bus out of Greenridge, I glanced back at the village one last time. The willow tree stood tall and silent, its dark history buried once more. I knew I would never forget the events that transpired there, nor the lessons I had learned about the unseen forces that linger in our world. Weeks passed since I returned home, and life resumed its normal pace. However, the memories of Greenridge haunted me, especially during quiet nights when shadows seemed to dance along the walls of my apartment. It was during one of these nights that I received a letter. The handwriting was unfamiliar, and there was no return address. Inside, I found a single photograph. Emma and her fiancé standing under the willow tree, smiling. The photograph was old and worn, but their faces were clear, almost as if they were looking directly at me. I turned the photograph over and saw a date written on the back. April 12th, 1923. My heart raced. That was nearly a century ago. How could a photograph that old have made its way to me? My curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to dig deeper into the history of Greenridge and the willow tree. The next morning, I visited the local library. I spent hours sifting through old newspapers, books, and archives, trying to piece together the puzzle. I learned that the willow tree had indeed been a site of numerous hangings during the village's dark past. Accused witches, criminals, and even innocent people had met their end there. One name kept appearing in the records: Eliza Thorne. She was the first woman accused of witchcraft in Greenridge and was executed under the willow tree in 1692. The records described her as a healer and a midwife, beloved by many, until a series of unfortunate events led to her being labeled a witch. Crops failed, livestock died, and children fell ill. The villagers, driven by fear and superstition, turned on her. Eliza's execution was brutal. She cursed the village with her dying breath, vowing that her spirit would never rest and that she would take her revenge on anyone who dared disturb her resting place. Her curse seemed to echo through the centuries, claiming the lives of those who encountered the willow tree's dark power. The more I read, the more I realized that Emma and her fiancé had likely been the latest victims of Eliza's wrath. But why had the photograph been sent to me? What connection did I have to this cursed place? My thoughts were interrupted by a loud crash from my kitchen. I rushed to see what had happened and found the photograph lying on the floor. The glass frame shattered. As I picked it up, I noticed a faint whispering sound, like someone trying to speak through the wind. I couldn't make out the words, but the sense of urgency was clear. I decided to return to Greenridge, convinced that the key to ending this curse lay in uncovering the full story. I arrived back in Greenridge under the cover of darkness, armed with the photograph and my resolve. The village seemed even more oppressive than before, the air thick with an almost tangible tension. I headed straight for the willow tree, hoping to find some clue or sign that would guide me. As I approached, I saw the old man waiting for me. His expression was grave, and he held out a weathered book. "This belonged to Eliza," he said. "It's her journal. Perhaps it can help you understand and end this once and for all." I took the journal with trembling hands and began to read. Eliza's words were filled with pain, anger, and sorrow. She wrote about the betrayal of the villagers, her longing for justice, and her fear of the dark force that had claimed her after death. She hadn't become a vengeful spirit of her own will. Something darker had twisted her spirit, binding it to the willow tree and feeding on her rage. Eliza's final entries spoke of a ritual that could cleanse her spirit and break the curse. It required the locket, holy water, and the blood of a descendant of the village's original guardians. I realized with a sinking feeling that the old man was the only living descendant, and his blood would be needed to complete the ritual. I explained this to him, but he nodded solemnly, as if he had known this all along. "I've lived my life knowing this day would come," he said. "If my sacrifice can bring peace to Eliza and to this village, then so be it." That night, under a full moon, we gathered the items needed for the ritual. The old man made a small cut on his hand, letting his blood drip into a bowl of holy water. I placed the locket and the photograph in the bowl, then poured the mixture around the base of the willow tree, reciting the words from Eliza's journal. The wind picked up, howling through the branches of the tree. Shadows seemed to writhe and twist around us, and I felt a cold presence watching. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the darkness, Eliza's spirit. She looked at us with the eyes filled with anguish. "Please," she whispered, "end my suffering." With the final words of the ritual, a blinding light enveloped the tree. The shadows dissipated, and Eliza's spirit began to fade, her expression one of peace. The old man collapsed, and I rushed to his side, but he smiled weakly. "It's done," he said. "The curse is lifted." The next morning, the village was transformed. The oppressive atmosphere had lifted, replaced by a sense of calm and renewal. The villagers, unaware of the ritual, went about their day with newfound energy and hope. The old man's sacrifice had not been in vain. As I boarded the bus out of Greenridge for the final time, I knew that the village and its people were safe. The willow tree still stood, but its dark history had been put to rest. I carried Eliza's journal with me as a reminder of the battle fought and the peace won. Thank you for joining me on this harrowing journey. Greenridge was a place that taught me the thin line between our reality and the supernatural. Remember, not everything can be explained, and some mysteries are best left undisturbed. If you enjoyed this story, please like, share, and subscribe for more tales of the unknown. Until next time, stay safe and beware of the shadows.